it's about time. My name, for those who might not know me, is Csi Effect, Professor of Spanish Studies at the University. I'm also, I think it's called the Vice Director of our research program. Uses PAST. So the PAST is a faculty-based program, which means that we have members in all different departments of faculty of arts. We've existed for like 5 years now, and I'm very, very happy today to be able to present to you Francisco Ferrándiz from Spain. I haven't prepared a proper presentation to merits, but I know Pablo very well, so I think that I can give a proper presentation anyway. Pablo is a trained archaeologist. I learned yesterday at the dinner. I didn't know. Before he became an anthropologist, and he made his PhD as an anthropologist at Berkeley University in the States. He had research stay in Hong for 1 year, and then went back to Mexico. During the stay in Berkeley, he had a period, longer period of investigation also in Venezuela. So the whole Latin America is very well. But I think that's what has made him the famous scholar that he is today in an international, more sound, in an international environment. This is work with the exhumation of mass graves in Spain. For the last 20 years, Paco has been working with the exhumation of mass graves as an investigator, a researcher of the Spanish Research Council. The Spanish Research Council is very different from the Danish one. In the Danish one, the Research Council only gives money to researchers at universities and stuff. In Spain, they recruit full-time researchers. That means that it is a very, very attractive position to have, and they employ the best researchers in the country in CSIC, as it is called, Consejo Superior de Investigaciones Científicas. Y ahí yo llegué a encontrarme, when I look at him, I start to speak Spanish. So I'll try not to look.
If it happens to me, tell me, please. Let's switch it to Spanish.
I worked at a couple of projects. The first project on the Spanish historical novel on the Spanish Civil War and the Franco's period. Yes, please disclose. And back in 2012, I think it was, we went to Spain with my whole group of researchers here from Oxford University to a conference I've discovered on the net just a few weeks before, and I was actually quite offended that we were not in any way advised or invited or anything, because I didn't know how the CSIC was working at that moment. And it was a conference organized between CSIC and Paco and a German university of Constance, I think it was, right? It was an extremely interesting conference with some of the biggest names in the field and stuff. And I was there. Why didn't they invite us? Why? What's going on? And then I met Paco and his very, very gentle and sympathetic personality instantaneously convinced me that it was no problem. It must be that we didn't understand anything. And from that point on, we began to talk about future collaboration, and we got a European project together, the so-called Horizon 2020. For 3 or 4 years, we collaborated where Paco was in charge of a web package where he made comparisons among the discourses around the exhumation of mass graves in 3 different countries: Spain, Poland, and Bosnia. Right? During that project, we got to know each other, and I therefore was very, very happy to be able to present Paco. His, as an academic, produced a huge, of course, series of research articles, book chapters, etc., etc. A few years ago, we published this book, El pasado bajo tierra, the past underneath the earth, on the ground. And as I understand it, there's an English updated version coming up in a few years. When Paco gets the time, because at the moment, Paco is not working in the CSIC. He's been hired by the Spanish government to be a counselor of the Spanish government's work with the historical memory in Spain. And among the most important things in the historical memory in Spain is, of course, this Valley of the Fallen, this absurd, gigantic monument, which is outside Madrid, where the founder of the Falange, José Antonio Primo de Rivera, is buried, and where Franco himself got buried when he died in 1975. And after a huge and very, very long discussion, he was actually exhumed 2 years ago, more or less at this point in November, I think. October 2019. And moved to the graveyard where his wife buried as well. But it still exists. So the huge question is what to do with such a monument from a fascist authoritarian regime in times of democracy. And I mean, we have seen all these examples, and we have here in uses of the past have had several occasions where we have discussed with other academics about the tumbling down of statues and monuments that's going on for the last 2 years all over the world. So I think that this presentation fits in very, very well with the line of discussions that we have given priority here. So please welcome.
Thank you, Hans. It's a great pleasure to be back in ours and in the Uses of the Past program. And thanks to Jan, to Hans, to Jacob, and Alexander, who has been entertaining me through the day. And I have like a written presentation, but I think that the most important part is the slides. So I will be reading my presentation and maybe skipping parts of it, and also improvising over the images when I see your faces. If you look like interested in the image, I could say stuff, because all of them have things behind it. So it's like 2 parallel talks. So if you get bored with my reading, just tell me, continue with the slides and forget about your talk. And yeah, I have also to tell you that I was telling Hans that the Valley of the Fallen for me is like it appears in my worst nightmares, because I have to deal with it on a daily basis, and this huge cross and this very strange monument, because one of the tasks that I have been commissioned to do is like to work out something with this monument, but it's like okay, Paco, do something. It's like, okay, whatever. So I'm just trying to create a plan, and I will be spelling out some of the ideas that we are working with. But then it's very difficult to be an academic and work within the government, because you have this wonderful sophisticated or not ideas, but then the politicians said like, oh, not wait 2 years or next time or whatever. It's very complicated, but we can talk about this later. No? What does it mean to be like a public scholar? First, because we have a lot of we are always in the media. I'm not now because now I'm in the government. I cannot speak because if I speak for the government. They don't allow me to speak anymore to the press, which is nice for me. And but then you have to deal also with politicians in a political party you don't belong to, and it's a difficult. It's complicated. So I'll start with this. In Baraka, 2007 documentary on his willings and dealings around Franco's official statuary and his production process, iconoclast artist Fernando Sánchez Castillo discloses the origins of one dubious bodily trace that got to his hands by chance, encapsulating many of the tensions lingering in Spain, in Spanish contemporary relationship with the 1936-1939 civil war and the 1939-1975 dictatorship. So the story goes. In November 1975, when preparing the funerary mask for the dictator after his death, one of the casting technicians managed to pull out 2 of his eyebrows from a cast where they had stuck. According to this unverified story, he stored the eyebrows of the Generalissimo as a curiosity for decades in a plastic cigarette pack container. For those of you who are Spanish, it's a plástico de educados, which is like a working class kind of cigarette, very strong. No? So after disclosing this event to the artist, he offered these eyebrows to him. The artist proposed an economic transaction instead, one that transformed these uncanny traces of Franco's body into a devaluated political commodity. How much are worth 2 eyebrows of a dictator? So that was part of his artistic proposal, was to, how do we do? What do we do with these eyebrows? Then he brought these hairs to the art market in military fashion, amplified by a magnifying glass and protected by a 400-kilo urn of double bulletproof glass and iron beams, imitating the urn that covered the Guernica when it came to Spain. So it was kind of also refashioning it for these 2 eyebrows. The genetic material in the hair follicles could open up the possibility of DNA analysis and scientifically resolve the contentious issues of the dictator's infertility, because it was linked to the serious injuries he received in a skirmish in African colonial wars in 1916. And the lingering gossip that he was not fertile and he was not the true father of his only daughter, Carmen. In Fernando Castillo, he's a very good friend of mine, and I will be showing some of his work through the conference. In his words, he says, it's curious how a pair of eyebrows could change many aspects of this country's history, provoking a small convulsion among nostalgic followers. What fascinates me is the potential power of such a small object, its repercussions and legal status, and the entire possibility of transforming the dominant history of virility, the family, and the conception of the state as it exists in totalitarian regimes. He's also talking about militarism, the kind of militaristic culture coming from Franco. No? This provocative art piece here, this is just a screenshot that I got from the video called Baraka, where this guy is explaining all this process to the artist. No? Oscillating this provocative art piece, oscillating in between a relic, a fetish, and a fake, expresses in burlesque manner the tremendous power that Franco's phantom, even if collapsed into 2 unauthorized traces of his body, still has to mobilize emotions and political tensions in contemporary Spain more than 40 years after his death. So this is the controversy that he created with this. We don't know if they're real or not, or if we should believe the artist or we should believe the cast technician, but that's part of the art piece, no? These ambiguities for part of the power. So allow me to jump from an almost indistinguishable bodily trace to a massive monument. Most of you know about this Valley of the Fallen. So, as they just sit in two extremes of the same memory ecosystem. Hans, as he said, he was. He asked me to talk about the Valley of the Fallen. That's not my area of expertise, or even when I don't have as much analysis I have on Valley of the Fallen as I have with the mass graves, because it's kind of moving toward this. But I think that what I will do is I will discuss some of the latest developments in the Valley of the Fallen, which is obviously, most of you know, the most controversial monument in contemporary Spain, and as a petrification of national Catholicism, which is the political religious ideology of Francoism, the most obvious expression of its moral order. So the question is, what is this monument doing in a democracy, 40-year-long democracy like Spain? How do we deal with it? In the last 2 decades, the monument has become under close scrutiny, and proposals for its future range from leaving it untouched to complete demolition. I just had a video of a missile going into the Valley of the Fallen exploding, but I didn't know you, so I was not. I can show it to you later, but it circulates through WhatsApp. So I think that in between these two extremes, calls from revamping, the monument in a democratic memory framework have more chances to move forward, and this is what we are working in now. No? Still, I need your help, because we don't know exactly what this transformation might mean. Which is its scope? It has to be decided, and I always think that people who come from the outside or are Spaniards but live outside can have an input that we don't have, because we are too much into the memory battles of our own. No? So I have to thank my colleagues and friends, Sarah Gensburger and Jenny Gustenberg, for proposing me to think about the controversies in the Valley of the Fallen in terms of decommemoration and its potential aftermath. That is, in Spain, we like the aftermath of the Valley of the Fallen, and I will talk about this in a number of times. We conceive of it in terms of resignification, which I don't know what it means. Nobody knows what it means, but we'll try to figure out if you can resignify or not. Basically, we're talking about the progressive dismantling of the political, religious, and funerary rituals, as well as the dominant narratives that have sustained its meaning since its inauguration in 1959, and is still partially linked to today, as well as the substitution for fresh commemorative and memorial elements. In this process, the monument should move, if this is possible at all, which I'm not sure, should be moving from a site of exaltation of the civil war and Francoism to a place of critical pedagogy of a totalitarian regime. Is this possible in a monument that was built to provide this very strong narrative? Okay, so this is another performance of Fernando Sánchez Castillo, the same artist. Before all the controversies, he went to the Valley of the Fallen with this supposed to be piece of stone, but it was just cardboard, so he was throwing it into the air and doing another video. Basically, he was playing with the idea of the massive monument and it could be light. So I don't know, it was kind of deconstructing it from an artistic point of view. So to better understand the scope of these changes, I will briefly outline first, for those of you who don't know, the origins and the historical the political history of the place. Later, I will discuss two major recent events that exemplify the possibilities or the potential for its transformation. Franco's exhumation, Hans already referred to it, but I will go into more detail here with behind the scenes kind of things that happened. And also the archaeological digging that just took place a month and a half ago of the camps where the political prisoners worked. Most the Valley of the Fallen, at least the big part of the work was done by political prisoners, like slave laborers. And this is a very important feature of the monument and part of the controversy around it. Basically, both instances, both the debates around Franco and what's coming out of this archaeological excavation, digging, introduce instances of perpetration, and I know that Hans likes he's very much, into the place that was built to glorify Franco's military victory. Because on the one hand, Franco's exhumation was linked to its growing perception in some parts of Spanish society, and particularly in the memorialist movement, in public opinion, as a bloody dictator. So that's something you have to deal with him because he was a perpetrator, he was a genocide. Whereas the camp unveils the terrible conditions that the political prisoners, oftentimes their families, had to endure, and evokes post-war repression, no? Of political dissidents. Okay, so let's start with the history of the monument. This is the official bulletin of the state. I will show you a couple of instances of it because it's in Spain. This is like the Bible. No? I don't know. You probably have a Danish official bulletin of the state. All the laws are published here. No? So this is this publicizes a decree, the foundational decree signed by Franco on April 1st, 1940. I'm going to read just the first paragraph, so you all understand what's the original intention of the monument in Franco's own words. No? The magnitude of our crusade, the heroic sacrifices that victory entails, and the transcendence of this epic history for the future of Spain cannot be perpetuated by the unassuming memorials commonly used in towns and villages to commemorate the outstanding deeds of our history and the glorious episodes of our sons. The stones erected must be endowed with the splendor of ancient monuments. He's thinking about the pyramids of Egypt. He's thinking about, and define time and oblivion. That's it. And must constitute a place of meditation and rest where future generations can pay a tribute of admiration to those who left them a better Spain. So this is just the first two paragraphs of this decree, and then it establishes the conditions and blah, blah, blah. But this is very important because it basically settles, crystallizes the meaning of the monument. No? The monument started to be built. So this is just a plan of the monument from above, like a zenithal plan. You see that there is a mountain. This is the basilica is drilled in the mountain. This is a massive basilica, like the second in the world. It's only second to St. Peter's in Rome. So you see this, the extent of this grandiose project. No, it started to be built in 1940 after this decree, and almost 20 years later, it was inaugurated by Franco on April 1st, 1959. Not innocently in the 20th anniversary of the military victory. So again, the meaning of the monument is very clear in the original decree, in the inauguration, and of course in Franco's discourse during the inauguration, where he again talked about the martyrs of Spain, the blood of the martyrs of Spain, seeding, the future of the country. Blah, blah. Okay. One thing that's probably some of you don't know is that the monument is also a pantheon, and this is amazing. It started to receive in 1959, right before the inauguration. It started to receive Civil War bodies from all over the country between 1959 and, stick to your chairs, 1983, when the socialist government was already in power. So the last body came in 1983, and then they stopped. No? Totaling an estimated 33,847 bodies. You can imagine what it means to bring 33,000 bodies to a monument 20 years after the war. That's massive transfer of bodies to the valley. Was a late manifestation of these are some images that we are finding now of the boxes that were coming from different parts of Spain, and you can see the places, Sueras, Alcora, the villages or cities where the bones were. The big boxes have 15 bones approximately. There are small boxes, individual ones with one body. You can imagine the mess that you have in the crypts right now. No? So, but this was just but a late manifestation of a very ambitious totalitarian memory building operation involving a strong necropolitical operation emphasis. as the cult to the rightful dead became paramount in Franco's regime. I'll show you some other image which dates back to the post-war, because during the post-war, just right after the war, Franco and his regime invested a lot of resources in exhuming the bodies of those who died for God and Spain. That means people who fought on his side. While at the same time, mass graves of Republicans were being produced simultaneously, and also sometimes in the same similar places. No? So, and the consolidation of this, the consequence of this was the consolidation of Spain of what we call like a kind of a funerary apartheid, like two spaces of death completely different, those of the winners and those of those who lost the war. And this helps understand what's going on now. I'll get into that later. No? So, for example, in the post-war, there was a lot of legislation to promote the exhumations, but it always said of those who fell for God and Spain, excluding the Republicans that were abandoned for decades in mass graves throughout the country. Up to 150,000 civilian Republicans were executed by Franco's paramilitary. No? So this is a major thing that you need to understand contemporary memory politics in the country. No? There are still many traces of this major memorial investment in public spaces around the country. For example, this is Puerto El Pico in Avila. This is the village where one of my grandfathers came from, and these are the kinds of monuments that still are throughout the country, and that were built in the post-war to homage those fallen for God and Spain. No? Hans has also mentioned the founder of the Spanish fascist party, a great admirer of Mussolini, was Antonio Primo de Rivera. No? As a crucial part of the Valley's necropolitical build-up, the leader of the fascist party was Antonio Primo de Rivera, who had been executed in November 20th, 1936 by the Republican in the prison of Alicante, was moved to the Valley of the Fallen, to a priority place. He was just placed in front of the main altar. The history of this body of Primo de Rivera, I'm not going to talk into it because it's very long, but in the post-war, he was transferred in one tremendous, very spectacular fascist funerary procession parade from Valencia, 10 days walking, to the Monasterio del Escorial, Philip II, I mean the imperial building in Spain, and he was planted on top of the royal pantheon. So when he was moved to the Valley of the Fallen 20 years later, the fascists didn't want to. It was a scandal. They booed, the officials that showed up, because for them it was a funerary degradation to move from the pantheon of kings to topping the pantheon of kings, but to the Valley of the Fallen. But you can see more or less the political power invested in this body, and how important it was for Franco to plant this body in the Valley of the Fallen to give legitimacy to the monument. No. 16 years later, Franco died, and we don't know exactly how. There are many different theories, but the decision was taken by top officials in his government to move all his body to the Valley of the Fallen. With this, the affiliation of the valleys to his moral universe was dramatically sharpened. So now you have the founders of the fascist party on one side of the altar and Franco on the other side of the altar. I'll show you some images of this high state funeral. For example, Pinochet, for those who work in Chile, Pinochet was here in this parade, and this is like one of the most famous images of the burial of Franco, with the church and all the officials and the military, and it was a top of the art, a state funeral in homage of Franco. And this is what I was telling you about the bizarre coincidence of their deaths, because they both died on November 20th. And they say that Franco was kept alive artificially so he could make it to the 20th. And so, but this created an incredible memorial axis in the Valley of the Fallen, because both of them died on the same day with a lot of years of difference. But then, every November 20th, you have like a double commemoration, which is, how do you make this? I mean, it's like, it's really powerful. I mean, just think of how I mean, it's very well designed, I have to say. You know, the monument, the cross, the bodies, everything is really well thought of. No? So during decades and well into the country's post-dictatorial democracy, groups of Franco supporters and Falange members continue to stage rituals in the valley, including military parades from Madrid, Roman salutes, the singing of fascist anthems, and all of this. No, this political code is slowed a bit. I mean, it was dwindling. And then it came to a halt in 2007 with a new memory law that prohibited any kind of political act in the monument. But still, they kind of sneak something. They will find a way to do something, or I don't know. They are working around it. No. So yeah, and also the Benedictines who are in charge of the monument, they. To this day, and some of you I know, you have been in the Mass when you went to the Valley of the Fallen in the MSA conference. They still continue to honor the memory of Franco, and they fought the exhumation with all their strength. And you know, they continue to pray to this day for the unity of Spain and the blood shed by the martyrs. It's more or less the same discourse that you could find in 1940. It's amazingly, well, it's 2.0 now because they know they have adjusted it, but basically what's behind, and this is the official narrative of the monument, what the Benedictines kind of convey, you know, in their. So I'm going to backpedal a little bit, just to see what's the connection of the Valley of the Fallen with this process of mass grave exhumations that is taking place in Spain. So very briefly, no. Because this is a parallel process that at some point intersected and now is part of the same process, memory process. No, as most of you know, in the year 2000 there was this exhumation in Prialanza del Bierzo. They were looking for 13 civilians, and they found a mass grave, and this was done with archaeologists and forensic doctors, and so it was a kind of a contemporary exhumation, no? Comparable to exhumations in Argentina, Chile, Bosnia, etc. So it was the first exhumation in Spain with these characteristics, right in the start of the 20th century. No? Let me show you some other images of. Because the other of exhumation, so you can see more or less, you know, the presence of the media. These people who are all here probably are the sons or the sons of people who are in the mass grave, and you know there is a lot of storytelling. It's very, very interesting to be in the mass graves, and you know, the way in which history is made here is very long and very complicated. But I will, if you have something you want to comment, we can do it later, because if not, I'll get stuck in this because I've written a book on that. So, okay. So this digging was led by technical experts, as I said, and set off a dazzling wave of diggings and reburials increasingly linked to global discourses of human rights and transitional justice. This is very important, very cosmopolitan, to put it in Hans' kind of classification of memory models, the transnational memory models, and to promote truth, justice, reparation, and guarantees of non-repetition, which are like the 4 mandates of transitional justice. Each of them is very problematic, but this is what's now working in the institutional discourse about memory in Spain, but also in the associations, which is in most of them. No? So since then, more than 900 mass graves have been opened, and around 10,000 corpses have been exhumed. Only 1/3 identified, but still, it's a massive. I wanted to tell you a little bit about something that is very close to my work, and I think it's very important to understand the kind of memory plot that's taking shape in Spain is connected to to this kind of intervention. You see, Aranzadi is a scientific society. This is a forensic-led exhumation, and it's very important that to try to understand the success of a bodily centric, what we may call forensic turn in the memory recovery associative field. That means that I'm going to try to tell you, instead of reading, what happens is that as this, just imagine that you are a relative and you are because there are a lot of relatives around the exhumation, no? And what they see is the way in which the forensic doctors relate to the bodies. And this is set up like a crime scene. It's a crime scene, no? So this criminological interpretation of the past, because in the afternoons, the forensic doctors could give a talk and they would say, today we have uncovered 3 bodies with bullet wounds here, with their hands tied, and all this criminological discourse is the main memory discourse that relatives get on the spot, and that they it's kind of colonizing the other alternative discourses of the past that could emerge from the exhumation. So this is the power of what we call the CSI effect. No? Everybody's kind of fascinated with forensics, and now sometimes even they give the body back to you with the forensic report on top. So you get your body and then your relative, and then you can open up this, and all of these are anatomic diagrams with the traces of the bullets and whatnot. So this is I call this phantom militarism. This is the concept that I use, the phantom militarism, which is like the memory movement now is totally influenced by the form of perpetration, because this criminological discourse that is mediating it is influencing the ways in which the memorial movement and the relatives. So this is just an example. This is a one-to-one printout of a mass grave in Burgos that the associations use to claim their relatives disappeared. So you have these transnational, images of the faces of the disappeared, but they are around a mass grave, which is not empty. It's a forensic. You can see the objects, and you can see the numbers of the individuals and whatnot. It's a forensic kind of performance, no, that is being displayed. So this is very interesting, and so we can go into this later if you want. No? Well, the demands of the memorialist movement started with these mass graves and all these processes, and they have increased during the years. There has been a process of what I call downloading. No? People could go to international conventions and download them, literally in their computers, and read them and interpret them without being lawyers. And then this will filter into the new demands and whatnot. So it's very interesting to see this translation of transitional justice and international law and international, transnational, cosmopolitan memory plots, which are dominant, as Hans has explained to us very, very eloquently. So one of the things that started to happen is that there was a focus on dismantling the honorable burials of some of the perpetrators of the military coup. This is just an example. What we could understand in terms of necropolitical dissonances. No? How is that Mola and Sanjurjo, 2 of the main generals, leaders of the military coup, were buried in a crypt in a huge monument in the center of Pamplona, in Navarra, where the bullfights, where the running of bulls. So they were exhumed a couple of years ago. And so that was part of the new reclamations of the associative movement. Like the perpetration, there is no safe space for perpetrators in this country. So it's not just the unburials of peasants or political activists that were killed during the war. It's also the perpetrators. So there has been a moving of the interest. It was amplified. Queipo del Llano, Moscardó, some of the generals are now under fire, or their burial sites are under fire. No? Okay, this is also another example of how this memorial movement that started in very local exhumations connected with these transnational plots. And here, for example, for universal justice, never again, the ethics of never again, which is kind of the cornerstone of transitional justice, is the images of Federico García Lorca or some other disappeared, are shown in these demonstrations. And so you can see how Spain is absorbing all of these discourses and recycling them. And also there is a parallel process of uploading. I mean, the Spanish corpses are also in the global pool of catastrophes and human rights violations. So there's like a two-way kind of, okay. So this is basically what we were researching during our unrest project, no? How the different modes that the Anna Bull and Hansen, Laue Hansen had defined in a seminal paper on agonism, and how in Spain we learned that they were kind of intermingled, and on the ground the complexity of the process makes that some activities can be in between two different modes. It was very interesting to see how they don't appear like in pure forms, no? When you start to, but they exist and they interact and they kind of sometimes work against each other. No? So this is another example. These images of these silhouettes, the shapes of this is Argentina, this is South Cone, 100%. It was never in Spain. Now you have these silhouettes and the interrogation mark, like these are disappeared. No? And so what I saw in the exhumation was that at first, when we looked at the mass graves, when we saw the bodies, everybody thought of them as executed. Now, 20 years later, everybody looks at them as disappeared. Victims for disappearance. It's a totally different kind of victimhood that is being promoted, and this transformation is expressed very, very eloquently, no? in the mass graves and in the way in which people deal with my father is disappeared. No? It's like so. Well, let's move on. This is another piece by my friend, just to give us some rest. So, to what extent are we still drinking from the same waters and blah blah blah? So this is kind of the provocative art that Fernando Sánchez Castillo. You should bring him to Arus because he's really something. No? So how this connects to the Valley of the Fallen? No? So there was this exhumation in Pajares de Adaja in Ávila in 2003, and what happened here is that they found the mass grave, and they found pieces of bones, but the large bones, the skulls, were not in the mass grave. So like, what has happened here? Like it's obvious that the mass grave was here, some personal objects. And this is what they found, just pieces of bones. And they said, what is this? No? So these were socialist, all of them were part of the Socialist Party of this village, and they were executed by Falange, by people of Primo de Rivera, so this fascist paramilitary. They were executed in 1936, cold-blooded. No, nothing, just they went to the village, picked them and shot them. This happened throughout the country. So this is my friend Fausto Canales, who his father is in the mass grave. No, he's a retired engineer, and he decided to do some research on his own, and then he found this. He found a report of an exhumation that took place in 1959, establishing that they were transferred to the Valley of the Fallen. He was totally astonished, like, how come that my father and his fellow members of the Socialist Party were transferred to that terrible Francoist monument? I mean, it's like it didn't make any kind of sense, no? So this was the first documented example that a Republican mass grave had been raided without the relatives' knowledge or permission during the process of transfer of bodies to the Valley of the Fallen. And this made the crypts even more complicated, because now it's not that you have 33,847 or more, probably more, but some of them are Republicans. And why they made it to the monument? I mean, frankly, it's very strange. The discovery was a total bombshell, and Fausto Canales, he became a media person, and he's been 18 years now waiting for his body to be unburied from the Valley of the Fallen. No? So now we know that out of these 33,000, around 20,000 have names and last names. So they are people that gave permission, and they are all Francoists. And there are 12,000 unknowns, and we don't know what these unknowns mean. we are learning to know. Now we have a research. We are doing research on the topic, and we learned that they also pulled entire military cemeteries to the Valley of the Fallen. No? And you don't know who is who, and it's really a messy situation. No? So the thing is that as research moved on, memorial activists started to file legal injunctions those of them who learned that the Republican relatives were in the Valley of the Fallen started to ask the state for the bodies to be returned to the families. No, they don't want to be in the Valley of the Fallen. That's something that is very easy to understand. No? Not in Spain, but here probably it's easy to. But some people in Spain is not in favor of this. No, so over the years, these lawsuits languished in bureaucratic, political, and legal labyrinths, and they were threatened by counter litigation with terms of profanation of the tomb. Now, just imagine the big profanation that is to bring 30,000 bodies with permission or not, Republicans, military, whatever, to the Valley of the Fallen. So that's a profanation. now that they have consolidated the cemetery, the profanation is to take somebody out. Well, okay, that's a different. It became very clear that the Valley of the Fallen had to be somehow deactivated at some point. No? So in the year 2011, there was a commission of experts appointed by the Spanish government, where I participated. Basically, it's how do we resignify the Valley of the Fallen? No? Reyes Mate is also he was not in the picture, but he's a friend of Hans also. He was the one who actually brought me in the commission. He's a colleague from the CSIC. And here for those of you who don't know the place, this is the Basilica, the subterranean Basilica. This is the commission. Just walking, you just imagine the situation. And when we went to the Valley of the Fallen to visit it in an official commission appointed by the state, the Benedictines retired to their cells, not to the monastery, to pray against us. No, and they, this discourse was coming out that the devil is coming to the building. Let's pray against the devil. Blah 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 blah. And they totally living in a different stratosphere. I mean, I don't. So this is. Okay, so the star recommendation. This commission gave a number of recommendations, like center of interpretation, take care of the cemetery, and a piece of art should change the focus of the monument, and Franco has to be exhumed. So it was that was part of the recommendation. Actually, the recommendation was broader than that. It was to resignify the monument. It is important to dismantle the Francoist funerary hierarchy. And this means two bodies, no? Franco and José Antonio Primo de Rivera. No? But these bodies are very different. They have different political histories. You cannot lump them together beyond the fact that they died on the same day. No? But so the decision was taken that Franco had to go out first because he didn't belong. He didn't die in the Civil War. That was easy to do. But then you have to do all the institutional politics to crystallize this in the law and go through parliament, and it's very complicated. No? So again, we were dealing with this. This is the second time I said this image. No? The displacement. The idea was that Franco had to get out, and that Primo de Rivera could stay, but had to be moved to the crypts with the rest of the people. He couldn't stay just in the front of the altar. There were no priority burials anymore in the building. No? Okay, so that was these were some of the recommendations of the commission. No? The very existence of the commission, it was a major step forward. No? It really created a major controversy in Spain. There was a lot of for example, these people. This is one image that I download from right-wing Facebook groups or web pages, where they felt that they were, unprotected by the Spanish state. They are also citizens. Now they had to deface themselves so they could show that they belong to the association Francisco Franco, whatever. No? So there was part of the game that was being played. Extreme right saying they are censoring us. We cannot be free anymore in that monument. So interesting, no? To see how these things work. No? Another recommendation was that in Spain, in spite of the technical difficulties, attend the claims of the relatives of the Republicans. No? So in this moment, I don't know exactly when, but some years later, these images that were taken in a forensic exploration of the site were leaked by the government to the press. So now we have the images that were leaked, that were done by the government, but were leaked to, and now you have their like watermark of the radio that leaked them. But they were done by the Ministry of Justice. So it's kind of how these things are circulating in the media. It's also very interesting to see how the government plays, different strategies, no? So this was the idea. These images were leaked to convey the idea that even when these Republican relatives, the relatives of Republicans had every right, it was impossible. Because this is an ossuary, that this is impossible. This is how I'm going to tell you, how are you going to tell one body from another, no? Nothing happened in the period 2011-2018. The right wing was in power. They are not interested in the Valley of the Fallen. They are happy with the idea that this is a monument for the reconciliation of the two Spains, that the 150-meter cross that you've seen is a symbol of universal peace that embraces every Spaniard. Even with this complexity I'm showing you, they continue to, there are Republicans there. So the crisis, but just think about what happened, with these Republicans. They are not there on their own will or their family's will. They were kind of kidnapped, and brought to the monument. So they don't care about this complexity, and they just say, no, this is a universal symbol of peace, embracing everybody. So we are all happy, and let's move on, and then don't open up all wounds because we have already settled, the transition to democracy. Okay, so, but in June 2018, the left won the elections again, and we have a new president. It's called Pedro Sanchez, and just 2 weeks after taking office, he decided, one of the first big commitments that he made after taking office was, I'm going to exhume Franco. That came as a shocker, and these demonstrations again. This is against the law. You cannot raise your arm, happily in the Valley of the Fallen, because the law says that no political display is allowed in this monument. But still, the civil guard and the police, they don't want, they kind of and so. But this was perhaps the bluntest memory decision taken by the Spanish government in the last few decades regarding the memory politics. In February 2019, he had to call for elections because there was no possibility of creating a pact with the left. But he won again, and then the process to unbury Franco continued. For the left, it was an act of justice. For the right, it was a red line. There is no exhumation of Franco, forget it. We are happy with it. But it was extreme right that took up the fight, spearheaded by the Franco's family and the Francisco Franco National Foundation, which still exists in Spain, and the law hasn't been able to prohibit or what. So this is the change in the law, as you can see here, in the point 3, in the Valley of the Fallen, only the bodies of those who died. This is a reform of the law, the 2007 law. This paragraph was Franco out. I mean, that's basically the legal form of just to justify this, because it took 18 months of fights, every kind of litigation, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And then to the Strasbourg Tribunal, Human Rights Tribunal, European Human Rights Tribunal. So a take no enemies fight brought around what I call necro-exemplarity, which is in moral terms, which is the institutional and symbolic treatment of Franco's body that Franco's body deserved according to the perceived moral qualities it represented and conveyed in the history of the country. This is just part of the fight took place in the media. This is a Basque program where the forensic Paco Echeverria spoke, and I was also in the program. And this is a Twitter by the Valley of the Fallen tweet, Alexander, saying like, these people, they don't know nothing. I mean, these two experts know nothing about the Valley of the Fallen. They only want to create like a black legend around the monument and whatnot. So this is just part of it, So the family demanded a high, like they demanded the suspension of the embargo, as I said. In case it could not be avoided, they requested the state, or demanded the state that he was buried with honors of head of state, with military parades, and you know how they say, like shooting of the weapons in the air, and also in Madrid's main cathedral, just by the royal palace, no less. So they just wanted him to, if they are moving him from the Valley of the Fallen, that's fine, but let's do some just state funeral, you know, as he deserved. No? Of course, the socialist government say, no way, you're out of your minds. No? No honors, no cathedral, no military presence, but a sober exhumation, you know, and reburial in a pantheon alongside his wife, which is what finally happened. So I will show you some images now, because this was, of course, it was just imagine the Spanish media. This was like everybody was talking about Franco, yes, know how it's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. And these are some of the infographies that, because here you have, this is José Antonio Primo de Rivera, fascist party. This is Franco. This is the November 20th, you know, memorial axis. And so how is he going to get out? Is he going to go on an ambulance, on a, you know, all these debates, and people were imagining stuff and whatnot. Very interesting, these infographics, not to analyze. No? So the exhumation conveyed a very strong political statement. No? Spain was no longer a comfort zone for dictators. No? These images, well, the highly choreographed exhumation, which was actually a true political thriller designed by top officials down to the last detail, was imposed on the family by the government. So the family got nothing out of the demands, because the Supreme Court said that the government had a right to do this state exhumation. They had every right to do it. No? The government retained full control over both the protocol and the information flow. No images of the exhumation in the Valleys Basilica were allowed, to the extent that when Franco's family went to the exhumation, of course, they went there, they requested their mobile phones, like bring them to us, because we don't want any image of this. And it was a scandal there, and they were screaming, kicking, and whatnot. And you know, in the Franco's burial, they said, this is a dictatorship, because you don't allow us to shoot. So well, that was kind of funny. Huh? So the state provided a single audio-visual signal broadcast by Spanish national TV, and it was rebroadcast internationally. There were like 500 media, you know, just feeding from this. But this was, and then the Csi Effect, which is the state agency, was the only one that could take photographs. No? So it made for a great expectation and entertainment as the country ground to a halt to watch such a historical moment. It was really, you would go in Madrid, for example, and everybody was in the bars and just with a beer or a coffee, just watching, because it took, you know, a few hours, and it was really. This image is very powerful also, which is the Ministry of Justice is in the middle, and then two top officials. That's now the ministry I work for, Bolaños, on your left side. After the family went out of the building, they stood there very seriously, like expelling them, so to speak, institutionally expelling them. There was a lot of controversy, because the associations of the memory said, no, this is too high a representation of the state for this killer. He should have been alone and whatnot. But I think this is it's a very powerful institutional statement, no, in terms of memory politics. No, this is our building. It belongs to the state. This body doesn't belong here. Get out. No, and this was some of the most incredible images. No, which is like. The relatives alone in a square where more than 50,000 people had been for the burial, totally alone, left. I mean, this is you know, it's I think also a very powerful image, you know, on their own. There was some for insiders, and then we later learned that there was a big fight for Franco's coffin, because the state had wanted to put him in a new coffin, because this is a very old coffin. And the relatives said, no, we don't want anything from the state. So let's move with the coffin. But the coffin was about to collapse. And so they wrapped it in a kind of, I don't know, some kind of cloth. But the image of the coffin with the cloth looked like one sweet, that one like a tigretón. Those who live in Spanish who live in Spain know what a tigretón is. No? And there were a lot of memes with the cream, just like. And we learned later that they were scared because if they had stumbled, Franco could have gone, the skeleton, because it was totally, it was not in very good shape. No? So it was, and this was part of it. He was lifted, airborne. To the other cemetery, and but it was very interesting because I was in the radio in Cadena Ser with Àngels Barceló, one main reporter, and we were commenting on the exhumation with the screens in front of us. And in the weeks before the exhumation, we've been in the media, like in morning, afternoon, night, early morning, on radio, TV, exhausting. No? So when I got home after the exhumation, I said, this afternoon, I'm not going to take the phone. I'll need a break. Nobody called. That was astonishing. No? So in this bulimic society we live, once he was re-exhumed, re-inhumed in another place, in the afternoon, they were already talking about Catalonia and the independentist movement and blah, blah, blah. Franco totally vanished from public controversy in Spain. So it was like this. Amazing, to see how these memory controversies build up. When there is a resolution, nothing happens. Nothing has happened since. Nothing. Everybody understands. So, well, the TV spectacle left the Spanish public with conflicting senses of relief, indifference, or outrage, depending on political leanings and whether Franco was considered a villain, a relic from the past, or a moral hero whose tomb had been shamefully desecrated. So these feelings, mixed feelings in Spanish society, but generally was okay. So the commemorative, I'm going to be just finishing because I don't know if I've been talking for a long time, no?
No, you're doing good.
Oh, okay, so the commemorating impact of this high stakes state burial in the valley, I think is easy to grasp. No? Not to have Franco in the monument is a major step forward, no? But still, the cross projects its shadow every day, every morning, and so I'm going to be in the last part of my talk. I'm going to be telling you about the project of resignification of the valley, so I can pick your brain in terms of what you think after knowing this background and the complexities that are behind the monument, even when I'm going very fast. No, but more or less you get the idea, no, the picture.
How long is the last part? 10 minutes?
Yeah, could be 10 minutes, 15, an hour.
I think do we need a 5-minute break before we take the last part?
We need to have the end ready for the end of the story, so we can't stop in the middle.
No.
Yes, I think we need a break.
Okay, so
we'll take 5 minutes.
Okay,
5 minutes just to get some air in the room, and if somebody wants to go to the dial,